Good morning. Today we are working on 1.2, which we'll learn how to write quadratic equations in standard form. We're going to factor when a, our leading coefficient, equals 1, and then we're also going to solve those equations. So in this section, we are only factoring trinomials whose leading coefficient is 1, okay? So standard form would look like ax squared plus bx plus c. Notice your a is what is in front of your x squared, b is what's in front of your x, and your c is your constant back here. Okay, and x squared, x, then this would be an x to the 0 power back here if it was here. Okay, so descending order on the variable there. So let's take a look at the quantity of x plus a times the quantity of x plus b. And we're going to assume that a and b here are real numbers. So let's distribute. I'm going to FOIL it out and say, okay, x times x equals x squared. X times that b is going to give me a bx. A times the x is going to give me ax. And a times that b is going to give me ab. Right, these guys here are actually like terms, so I am going to factor the x out of there and rewrite that. So this is going to be x squared plus, and I'm going to switch up the order here too, so I'm going to say a plus b times the x. They both factored out that x because they both have it in there, plus the ab back here. Okay, so notice that right here, this is the product of a and b, and this is the sum of a and b. So if we can identify what our a and b are, all that we have to do is plug it into our template up here. All right, so let's see how that works. So to factor a trinomial with a leading coefficient of 1, we need to find a and b, whose sum is the coefficient of the middle term and whose product is the constant term. All right, so let's take a look at this. And I'm going to do this example 1 the longest way possible. I got a leading coefficient of 1. It's in standard form, you know, a 2, a 1, and a 0 back there. So I need factors of 12 that will give me an 8. So let's say we don't know our multiplication tables all that great, so we'll make a little table over here. 1 times 12 will get me this 12, but if I add them together, it doesn't come up to 8, so that's not going to work. 2 times 6, if I multiply them together, that gives me 12. And if I add them together, it gives me 8. So that would work. We have another combination here of 3 times 4. If I multiply those together, it gives me 12. But again, if I add them together, it does not give me the 8. So these guys right here don't work. And the numbers that I'm looking for are the 2 and the 6. And notice that they're both positive. So when I go to do this, I go x like that. Okay, so this is my template. All that I do is take those two numbers and put them right here. And I could have put the 6 up here and the 2 back here. It doesn't matter. Okay, well, let's check this to make sure it worked. X times x gives me the x squared. X times that 6 gives me plus 6x. 2 times the x gives me 2x. And 2 times the 6 gives me 12. Those guys are like terms, put them together, x squared plus 8x plus 12. So it did work. All right, so let's move on to our next one here. It's in standard form, has a leading coefficient of 1. So I need factors of 56 that will give me a 15. So, you know, I have that 1 times 56, a 2 times, let me see, it goes in there, 23, right? No, that's not right. That goes in there, 28 times. Okay, that's not going to give me 15. 3 doesn't go in there. 4 go in there because 1 time with 14, that's not going to get me the 15 either. 5's not going in there evenly. 6 won't, 7 won't, or 7 will. 7 times 8 is 56. And if I add those together, it gives me the 15. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for. So here's my template looking like this. Plug in those numbers. They're both positive, so +7 and +8. And there you go. Okay, next one here. Now this one here, it's in standard form, but I have a leading coefficient that is not 1. And I'm taking a good look at this, and they all have 2 in common. So I can factor that out right up front and get a 2 times the quantity of x squared plus 3x plus 2. And now I need to take a good look at this in here. Can I factor that in there? So factors of 2, that will give me a 3. And here's my template here, like this. Make sure you bring that 2 down. Factors of 2, that'll add up to 3. I only really have one option here, 2 times 1. Okay, and multiply them together gives me 2, add them together gives me 3. So both positive, and there you go. Okay, another one here. Notice this time we have a positive over here and a negative here. Now if this one is negative, that means that both of the numbers I multiplied together to get that positive 12 are negative. All right, so I'm looking at for 2 negative numbers. And here's my template. I know they're both negative. All right, factors of 12, that'll give me -7. So I have that 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4, and they're all going to be negative here. Okay, so if I do this one, that gives me a positive 12, and if I add them together, it gives me a -13. That doesn't work. I'm looking for -7. This one, add them together, it gives me a -8. Doesn't work. This one here, if I add those together, it gives me the -7. So now I'm going to put in a 3 here and a 4 here. They were both negative, so notice they both end up being negative over there. This one here, same type of thing. This is positive, so I I either multiplied 2 positive numbers together or 2 negative numbers together to get that number. And since this one is negative, I know it's now 2 negative numbers. So I'm going to get my template going here. No, they're both negative. Factors of 42, that'll give me a -13. Now you can make your table if you want to, but if you know your multiplication tables fairly well, you should be able to see that that is a 6 and a 7. So if I multiply a -6 and a -7 together, I'll get the positive 42. If I add the -6 and -7 together, I'll get the -13. All right, let's take a look at this one here. So a -14 now. So to get that -14 back here, I had to multiply a negative and a positive together. So one number is positive and one number is negative. Okay, so I have a 1 and a 14, so that could be, a +1 and -14, or I could have a -1 and a +14. So 2 and a 7, one of them's negative, one of them's positive, and those are the only options I have. So if I add those together, -13, no, I'm looking for a +5. This one will give me a +13, no. Well, this one gives me a +5, that works. This one a -5, so that doesn't work. So make my template right here, and all I have to do is plug those numbers in. So one's a negative number, and the other one's the positive number. Just take a few seconds to make sure you got it right here. So -2 times 7 gives me the -14. -2 plus 7 gives me the +5. So we're good. Another one here, so it's in standard form. Factors of 24, that will give me a 5. I got a negative here, so I know one's positive and one's negative. Okay, one positive number and one negative. I'm thinking 8 times 3. 8 times 3 will give me that 24, and I know one of them's negative and one is positive. And because this is negative, I know my bigger number is negative. Okay, so now if I multiply those together, it gives me a negative 24. If I add those together, it gives me the negative 5. So I got my template here, X and X. Those are my A and B. I'm just going to plug those in right here. This one was negative, that one's positive, so make sure you got your signs right there. And again, you could have your X plus 3 up here and your X minus 8 back here. It doesn't matter, okay? This last one here, this one's positive and this is negative. So I know I have two negative numbers. Well, -1 times -1 will give me that +1, but if I add those together, it gives me a -2, not this one here. And there's times I've had students go, well, it's +1, +1. Well, if I multiply a +1 and a +1 together, yes, I do get that +1 here, but add them together, it gives me a +2. I can't do this one. This one is prime. We cannot factor it. In a few chapters, we'll figure out what to do with it. But right now, just write down prime. Okay, so now we're going to solve a bunch of these quadratic equations when my leading term is in 1, okay? There are some steps we need to do. First thing you should do is always write your equation in standard form, you know, the descending power on those exponents. So we're looking for that ax squared plus bx plus c. And if there's a greatest common factor, now's the time to factor it out, okay? Then we're going to factor it using the skills we learned in 1.1. Then we're going to use our zero factor property. The reason we are factoring is so we can change this addition problem into a multiplication problem so we can use this zero factor property to solve it. So keep that in mind. Then we're going to solve. Okay, so let's take a look at this first one. It's in standard form, equaling 0. We always want it to be equal 0, so I guess I should have put that up there. Okay, descending powers equaling 0. So next thing says greatest common factor. I don't have one. So then it says factor it. Okay, so let's get our template out. I got that leading coefficient of 1. So I need factors of 6 that will add up to 5. Now be really careful on this one because that 6-5 combo, depending on what those signs are, it can be different numbers, okay? So I need factors of 6, and what I usually do is write something like that out there that will add up to 5. So I got a 3 and a 2. So 3 times 2 will give me that 6, and if I add those two together, it will give me the 5. So +3 +2, that's equaling 0. Now we can use our zero factor property. And remember the other day, we make our two little mini equations. So x plus 3 equals 0. And I move that over, solving for x. And I'll get x equals -3. Remember, just the opposite. So this one here is going to be -2. All right, let's take a look at another one. Standard form equaling 0, we're good to go. So let's find factors of -6, so we know one's positive and one's negative, that will add up to -5. Now remember, be really careful with the 5-6 combo. Okay, so I'm going to say -6 and a +1. If I multiply them together, it gives me that -6. If I add them together, it gives me -5. Okay, so here's my template, putting in the -6 and the +1, and it's equaling 0. Now we're going to use our zero factor property. So if I solve this one, it will give me a +6. If I solve that one, a -1. Okay. All right, this next one here is not in standard form, so we need to put it into standard form first. So I'm going to move this over and switch up the order here. So 2x squared minus the 16x plus 32 equals 0. All right, make sure that negative stays with the 16 over here. All right, and this one crossed the equal sign, so it changes signs. Well, I'm looking at this. I don't have a 1 right here, but that 2 can be factored out of all of that. So again, x squared minus 8x plus 16 equaling 0. Okay, now this right in here, let's see if we can factor that. Here's my template. I'm bringing down that 2. Factors of 16, that will give me an 8. So a negative 8. So I know both numbers are negative. Well, negative 4 and a negative 4 equals 0. Now I'm going to use my zero factor property. Now this one here, if I set that 2 to 0, I'll get 2 equals 0. Does that make sense? No. I only have to set things to 0 that actually have an x with it, so we don't have to do that one. This one here, opposite, so it gives me a 4, and this one is a 4. So our answer is 4. This is actually a double. You can write it once if you want, or twice. It's up to you. Okay, this one here, it is descending powers equaling 0, but I notice I got an x in every term there, so I'm going to factor out an x. X squared plus 5x plus 6. Okay, I got that 5, 6 combo going on again. So factors of 6, that will give me a 5, a 3, and a 2. So if I multiply them together, it gives me 6. If I add them together, it gives me 5. Here is my template, bringing down that x. Okay, so plus 3 and a plus 2, because they're both positive. All right, this time, I need to set that to 0. So this one will give me a 0, this one gives me a negative 3, and that one is going to give me a negative 2. Okay, this last one here, we have a problem that's not in standard form. And since this one is negative and it's my leading term, I'm going to move it over here. It's all right for everything to be over here. It's not hurting anything. It can be on that side of the equal sign. So when I move that over there, I'm going to add x squared to both sides. That will zero out that side, give me an x squared plus x minus 20 equaling 0. And if this truly bugs you over here, just write equals 0 over on that side. It's not hurting anything. Okay, so now it's in standard form. I am going to put my template here. Now I need factors of negative 20 that will give me a positive 1. I'm thinking a 5 and a 4. And this one is positive, so my bigger number is positive. Put that there. Okay, so 5 times negative 4 gives me the negative 20. 5 plus a negative 4 gives me the positive 1. So plus 5 minus 4. Okay, and that is equal to 0. Now I use the zero factor property. This one gives me a negative 5, and this one gives me a 4. And there you go. All right, there's plenty more samples on, excuse me, on my Open Math videos over there, so feel free to go look at those. Have a great day. Bye.